we cannot take away the external influence of what we've seen altogether.
Correct.
For example, Mr. Donald Trump, who had said they will come to Nigeria gun blazing, and that they will, based on what they are reading, that there is a Christian genocide in Nigeria. And then you see attacks on churches. Churches are not the only ones that are doing attack, but abduction of priests in churches, abduction of traditional rulers. There are people who have been killed in Kebbi, abducted in school and all whatnot. To you, is there a possibility of a link that these terrorists or these bandits are listening to the political dimension? And I've spoken to politicians on this program who have said, look, Seun, forget it. This is political. All what we are seeing in the last few weeks or so is politically driven. What do you make of those words?
Somehow you can't hold people for their views. But the reality is that our issues in terms of security challenges are multifaceted, implying that just as you have terrorists who have an ideology, you equally have those who are bent on, targeting Christians, and there are also those who are also targeting communities, that is, desiring to displace communities and wanting to stay in those communities to be able to have a voice, or perhaps that could be their bargaining chip, as it were. For whatever reason, there are different reasons. There are those who are also regarded as economic criminals and so on and so forth. So if you now just assume, or if you like, lump the entire thing to be one of those strands, then of course that would be, the analysis would be wrong. And those who also say it's political is also, again, that will be lumping all the issues to assume that all the other issues, they do not matter. It's just for you to heap it at the back of the politicians. That's also not correct. That does not mean that some politicians have not taken advantage of the insecurity, or if you like, the state of under governance, as it were, if I may use that coinage, to want to perhaps gain some form of leverage, to give impression that they can do better. Others perhaps want to give impression that, look, to score the point that there is poor governance, they could also instigate certain crises in one way or the other. So those who believe that is purely political, maybe assuming their argument, maybe having the argument from that angle. But then, for me as a security person, and who of course has seen it all, it would be wrong for So General, for the fact Christians have been targeted. Of course, some Christians have been targeted. No doubt about it. For the fact politicians are funding terror in this country. Some politicians. Yeah. If I wouldn't want to say. So when I say politicians, that means that there are the politicians who are funding it. The repentant terrorists, and people had picked holes in that strategy of recruiting, because there are those who feel that the repentant terrorists were being recruited into the army. Well, so I'm glad that you mentioned this. It has always been a burden for me where we got this impression from. Were they ever recruited? How can they be? Does not exist. Before I became CDS, I was theater commander, Operation Lafia Dole. Yeah. From there, I crossed over to become Force Commander, Multinational Joint Task Force. When I left, I became the Chief of Defense Training and Operations. I was overseeing all that, and then I became Trader Commander, and I got appointed as the CDS, which I spent 2.5 years in that post. How could it be? Where did we get that impression from? I cannot tell. Now, but we have Operation Safe Corridor, which I supported, which I will support today, and I'll continue to support even tomorrow. What is Operation Safe Corridor? What does it entail? It is looking at those that have been arrested, engaged in the act of terrorism and banditry, that are profiled, and so the low risk amongst them, meaning that those who were conscripted into that criminal enterprise, and those perhaps who got themselves caught up in the milieu of the criminality, all right, are now separated and then sent to the camp where they are de-radicalized, all right, over a period. It's like somebody also in a correctional facility where, certain teachings are brought to them and then some skills are also given to them before allowing them to be reintegrated into the society. On what grounds would there be people talking about?
No, because there are words out there that some of them found their way.
How can they find their way into the military when first and foremost their biometrics were taken, the records of them, and not only were the biometrics taken, there is no on those services, especially, let me speak for the military. Army, Navy, and Air Force, each time they are recruiting, you have recruitment officers in every of the states who go with those data, and they are meant to scrutinize them.
So structurally within the military, yes, it's almost impossible. Some of these elements
it is impossible
to find their way in the military.
It is impossible, and besides, you can't come into the military if those from your local government have not actually sanctioned you. That is,
fit enough.
Yeah, not just consider, because
like a surety,
a guarantor. Mm-hmm. It is the responsibility of the local government, that do that.
So let me take you to a tactical or a strategic analysis of what is happening.
Correct.
Would you say that the escalation we see in killings and the abduction is a sign of new threats or failures of existing systems?
Okay, now, first and foremost, over the years, we have had governance failures. And so leading to...
And it's across levels.
Across levels.
Federal, state, and
local government.
And sometimes we don't have any.
Any at all. In fact, my experience, especially from the Northeast, especially in Borno State, gave me an indication to this. And of course, when I got also exposed to the issues in the Northwest, it was quite mind-blowing for me, wherein some local governments have no representation of governance. So sometimes you see that all this local government is just by name. And so you don't have local government officials at that level to mitigate crises.
So no water, no road,
completely
nothing that makes any human being function.
Completely absent. And so, meaning that over a long period of time, we have neglected, we are actually perhaps taking the people for granted. And I think that is something that everybody in Nigeria must understand and come to grips with. Not to apportion blame, not to point fingers, because pointing fingers will certainly not solve a problem. But then for you to know the problem, because a problem that you do not know is a problem you can never solve. So if you have that at the back of your mind, the next question to ask is, what then do we do? And then getting to know what you would do is to now begin to talk about what resources that are necessary to be able to do that. So for me, it's failure of governance over a long period. Now, because even what we also term as religious crises, what we also term as tribal and ethnic crises, is also a result of governance failures. So it's the aggregate of all this that has given rise to it. And then, of course, with the economic crisis, economic situation that we find ourselves currently, has also made it such that people now look for different avenues to eke out a living, and some have taken up the criminal enterprise as a means of meeting that need. So a mix of factors, if you like, has given rise to this.
So you don't think that we have emerging or new threats? This is an existential failure of systems in terms of political governance in the country.
Certainly,
that is what we are seeing.
Certainly it is. But then you must also know there is conflict transformation. Threats do transform, because just as you have in the newer technologies, this same way that even social thoughts, if you like, social interactions transform, and then what manifests is what you now begin to see. But the underlying issue is the fact that it's governance failures over a period, because you can't use 1960 tools to address the 21st century tools.